I never thought a trip to Walmart would change my life. But that's exactly what happened last Saturday. Standing in the toiletries aisle. I was doing what I always do. Figuring out if I could afford the shampoo and conditioner this time. Everything had become so expensive. I stared at the shelves, desperately searching for a cheaper price I might have missed. That's when I spotted a sales sticker on a nearby shelf. I checked it out. The 2-in-1 baby shampoo and conditioner was on sale. I grabbed a jar from the shelf and put it in the cart. "Isn't this for babies?" my son Joey asked, leaning forward from his seat in the stroller to examine the jar. "No, honey." I smiled at her. "They all work the same. And this one smells like strawberries, which is much better than the one they usually give us. Don't you think?" He shrugged. "Well, I think it'll be nice to have hair that smells like strawberries. Now let's have some macaroni and cheese for dinner." Okay. That's how it always was. Working as a medical receptionist, I earned just enough to keep us afloat, but too much to qualify for benefits. Every day, I processed insurance applications for patients who had better coverage than I could dream of getting for Joey and me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been pinching every penny since my ex left us when Joey was 2. But it never seemed to be enough. We were heading back to our beat-up Honda when I saw the homeless old lady near the turnaround. He was wearing a shabby coat. His gray hair was disheveled, and his hands were dirty. But something about his eyes caught my attention. They weren't desperate or haunted, as one might expect. They were kind, filled with a gentle warmth that made me stop in my tracks. "Please," she cried, her voice shaking. "Can you take me to St. Mary's Church? I need to go there." Joey squeezed closer to me as the woman approached. Instinctively, I clutched my purse, mentally calculating the cost of the trip. Mary's was on the other side of town, about a 20-minute drive, and gas wasn't cheap these days. "I'm sorry," I started to say, but then I saw tears welling up in her eyes. "Please," he whispered, and something inside me broke. I looked at my son, and then at the woman. The desperation in her voice touched a place in my heart I couldn't ignore. I sighed. Get in." His face lit up with such profound gratitude it almost hurt to look at. "Thank you. Thank you very much," he repeated, getting into the back seat. During the ride, she thanked me again and again. I tried to brush it off, telling her it wasn't a big deal. Because what else could I say? She was probably going there to seek refuge or pray, and helping her seemed like a good idea. When we arrived at St. Mary's, she practically jumped out of the car, murmuring a final thank you before disappearing through the heavy wooden doors. Joey and I watched her go, both of us silent. He said as we drove home, his serious little face in the rearview mirror. "You did the right thing helping that woman. I'm glad I have such a good mom." I smiled, blinking back tears. "Thank you, honey. Sometimes being kind is more important than anything else." To be honest, I had mixed feelings about what I'd done. Right now, we could get by despite the extra gas I'd just used. But if any unforeseen expenses came up, I let out a sigh. It would be nice to live in a world where what I told Joey about being kind was true and absolute. But the world wasn't that simple. These thoughts came back to haunt me 3 days later. When someone knocked on our door at 7 in the evening, Joey was already in his pajamas, lying on the living room floor with his homework done. He looked at me curiously when I went to open the door. At first, I thought the woman standing there had gone to the wrong address. She looked like she'd stepped out of a glossy fashion magazine, with her elegantly coiffed hair, subtle makeup, and a cream-colored Gucci coat that probably cost me more than 3 months' rent. Then I looked into her eyes and exclaimed. It was the homeless woman from the Walmart parking lot. Despite the drastic changes in her appearance, I immediately recognized her kind eyes. What's going on?" I stammered. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice stronger and more refined than I remembered. "My name is Eliza, and I owe you an explanation." I nodded mutely. stepping aside to let her pass. "Mom," Joey called from the living room. "Who is it?" "It's the lady from Walmart," I said, still staring at her transformation. Eliza settled onto our worn sofa, smoothing her expensive coat. "I know you must be wondering why I'm here, and how I've made such a drastic change in the short time since we met. To explain my change of circumstances, I must tell you about Albert. 40 years ago, I was young and foolish," Eliza said. "Albert was my fiancé. We were deeply in love. But when our wedding day arrived, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I chose my career over my love. At first, it seemed like a good and practical choice. My business prospered for several years. But then it slowly crumbled around me. All I had left was a letter from Albert, in which he promised me his eternal love. In that letter, he swore that he would wait for me at St. Mary's every Sunday at noon, until I was ready." He paused, clasping his hands. "For decades, shame kept me from going back to see if I'd kept that promise. But 3 days ago, I hit rock bottom. I realized I had nothing left to lose. And that's why I asked you to take me to St. Mary's." I settled in next to her on the couch, understanding dawning. "I was waiting for you. After all these years?" She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Just like he promised. He said he'd never stop loving me and never stop believing in our love. He built an empire while I waited. And now I can live the life of my dreams with the man I love. I asked a lot of people for help that day, but you were the only one who even looked at me. And when I told him about you, he insisted we find you. Albert is waiting outside," Eliza said softly. "Can he come in?" I nodded. Eliza walked to the door and opened it, admitting a distinguished-looking man in an impeccable suit. "I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart." "You didn't have to help Eliza," Albert said, his voice warm and sincere. "But you did. And thanks to you, I have the love of my life back." "No problem. But, how did you find me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Traffic cameras. Police connections," he admitted. "I know it sounds alarming, but I just wanted to express my gratitude. Please allow me to return your kindness." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Your son's education will be fully funded through college. And this," he handed me the envelope, "is just a small token of our gratitude." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $150,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. "Is this real?" I couldn't stop looking at the numbers. Albert laughed. "Very real. And there's one more thing. Eliza and I are getting married next month. We'd love for you and your son to be there." I couldn't speak. Joey came over and wrapped his arms around my waist, looking at me with his wise eyes. When they left, I stood in the living room, clutching the check to my chest. Joey hugged me tightly, and I let the tears fall freely. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked me. "Yes, baby," I whispered, running my fingers through his hair. "I've never been better." Looking around our small apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Not just for me, but for Joey's future. All because that day at Walmart I had chosen kindness over caution. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can change lives in ways we never expected. That day taught me that even when you're struggling, when every penny counts, and the future seems uncertain, there's always room for kindness.